of self-government within uh, within the United States and the states in which they exist. So they can vote, for example. Okay. Good morning, or I always good morning, by the way, because there's always a chance for the day to improve. Wanted to reintroduce a former old fart who's joined us again, Chuck Beauregard.
Oh,
In the past, sometimes I forget when new people come in or people who haven't been around for a while come in, I forget to introduce them. So wanted to make sure I didn't do that now. Tonight, we're at least going to start talking about an interesting topic, which has relevance today, not only culturally, but politically, and that is freedom. What is it? How does it work in our society, etc.? So Chuck was looking it up earlier this evening. You want to say what the dictionary says freedom is?
well, the Oxford Dictionary, just the first definition was it's the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants. So I think that's a fairly clear, really cut definition of what it is.
Well,
then it branches off into all different possibilities.
I think that it needs some codicil. Act, speak, or think the way one wants, as long as it doesn't negatively impact others. As an example, you're not free to rob a bank. You're not free to kill your neighbor for no reason other than self-defense. You're not free to slander somebody. You're not free to, there are lots of things you're not free to do just because you want to do them. So freedom has as much to do with your responsibility to others and the country that you're living in as it does your individual rights to do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Paul.
Yep.
I mean that's an interesting limitations you put up there. But what I was going to add to that is when you look at in an individual's freedom with those limitations, you have to, if you for the moment, if you brought the individual down to a family level, even at a family level, you think you are free, but actually you're not, because family imposes restrictions on your action, what you can do and what you should not be doing. And that also is an important aspect of that freedom, because your freedom, that what you want to do is limited by what the family is imposing on you. And at the same time, gets back to the responsibility piece. What is your responsibility towards your own family with respect to what you want to do? So those two have to kind of intersect somewhere before you bring in the whole notion of community and the nation. Because as long as you can do this piece with the family, and one case in point is freedom of choice to get vaccinated. Is that really a personal choice or not? Is it your personal choice or your personal freedom? What are you telling your family about it? And what impact does that have on your own family, let alone the outside, the neighbor, let alone the community or the country? So that's where I think it becomes much more pervasive and contextual when you, at the same time, contextual and pervasive. So I don't know how to explain it beyond what I just said. Maybe a little bit later, I will talk a little bit more about it.
Well, there's another view of it, and that is, I think that people are free to decide whether they want to do something or not, but they have, if they choose to do something that is not what the society feels is important, they have to accept some limitations. For example, you're free to walk around without clothes. But if you do it in your own home, that's your choice. You and your family will come to some kind of an agreement. If you do it out in the town square, then the society is going to take action. So you're free to do what you want, but you have to accept that there is going to be there are going to things are going to happen, so that you have to do it in certain limited circumstances. And I think that applies to the vaccine. If I have not had the vaccine, by the way, I have had it, just to avoid any questions later, then if someone says, well, you can't go to a Celtics game, or you can't go to the grocery store, or you have to wear a mask, that's one of the things that you accept when you say, okay, I'm going to do what I think is appropriate, or what I want to do, as the case may be, because I'm a free man. Does that make sense? That's sort of expanding on, I think, what Obanon was saying.
Yeah, that's basically it. That's as that has the effect of impacting other people.
Right.
You could be spreading a disease. If you catch it, you could be spreading that disease to other people. And by that desire not to be vaccinated or whatever, you can, we have lots of things that we can't do. We can't yell fire in a movie theater. We can't. You're free to say it, but there are consequences for doing it. You're not free to shoot all your neighbors. Yes, you can do it, but you'll probably get the electric chair if you do. Life in prison. So I think the idea of freedom is, as long as it doesn't impact other people, is in a negative way. You're not free to make up lies about slander or libel. Those things are not acceptable. So anyway, that's my idea of what freedom means. You're free to do what you want as long as it does not negatively impact other people.
Okay, let me expand this a little bit, because people are free to do some things, and the people around them are also free to do some things. And occasionally we run into a situation where my freedom affects your freedom. And if you and I cannot resolve that, something that allows both of us to do what we feel is important, then you have to have somebody else adjudicate it and say, okay, you want to do X and that person wants to do Y, and only one of you can do it at a time. Who goes first? And not only do you have to have somebody that both parties agree can make the decision, but that party has to have some enforcement ability. Because let's say I want to play loud music. I want to play loud music at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then again at 12 o'clock at night. My neighbor may not be home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, may not have a problem with it. At 12 o'clock at night, he wants to be sleeping, and your loud music or my loud music prevents my neighbor from sleeping. So, whose freedom has priority now?
Well,
And
I'd like to back up a little bit here and go back on the vaccines for just a couple of moments.
okay,
I've had my 2 initial shots, so I'm going to get the booster shot in a couple of weeks. But the fact is, there are people out there who have natural immunity, and it seems to be a question with how to substantiate that or give them credit for having natural immunity because they've already had the virus. And then there's also questions of people who, for religious reasons, don't feel comfortable about taking it, or their own personal feelings about some medical issues that they don't want to take it. I've seen some people interviewed today who are women who are pregnant, and they have concerns about taking the shot while they're pregnant. And there's thousands of people that are losing their jobs because they refuse to take the shots, and especially in the medical field, as well as the state police in Massachusetts, having a large number of people. So there are some real issues with this.
Well, just to answer to that debate briefly, is that there are a lot of data already available about safety of the vaccine for pregnant women, and also most of the time, most of the people, it is safe except for rare issues of medical concern. There, in those cases, yes, maybe no vaccine may be allowed, but those are really rare cases. But most of the people should be able to tolerate the vaccine as it is.
I mean, I have heart conditions, so I asked my doctor whether I should take the vaccine or not, and he's told me I should. So I felt comfortable doing that. To the best of his knowledge, it'd be beneficial.
I mean, because the alternative is worse. That's the problem, and that's why it has to be when people extend this personal choice piece into the vaccine. You have to think about: are you taking Tylenol? Are you taking aspirin? Are you taking medications for heart condition? If they have also gone through all those testing, and they are safe because FDA watches on all these. And now vaccine has been given to millions of people, and most of us have survived. So it should not have this. What worries me is that when people, educated people, not only people who are not supposed to know, they know, and then they say, I will do my own personal research. Now the problem with that is we have qualified virologists, qualified vaccine people who have spent their lives doing that. And then if they come back and tell us X, Y, and Z, what kind of condition am I to do research, which is impossible. That's what bothers me that way.
Well, I would think that anybody who says they're going to do their own research are actually including that they're going to be checking with their doctor or a health professional, not just going in a book and looking information up.
Well,
so
I mean, that's perfectly okay. That's perfectly, because one should consult. That's important.
Well, there's another factor as well. If you decide, and there are people who cannot take the vaccine for medical reasons, they have allergy issues.
Yes.
If you do not take the vaccine for whatever reason, let's open it up and say you just decide you don't want to take the vaccine. In order to protect the rest of the society, you have to do a few things. One of the logical things to do, it's not totally prevented, but at least it helps, is to wear a mask. so that you're not absorbing the virus, and assuming that you have absorbed the virus, you're not spreading it out. You will to some extent, I'm sure, but to a much less extent than you would otherwise. If you say, I'm free not to take the vaccine, but I'm also free to go and live my life the way I want to live it without wearing a mask and without social distancing, et cetera, all the things that we've learned over the past 100 years, then you're violating everybody else's freedom. Is that a reasonable conclusion?
Of course it is. And that's just, that goes along with what I said, as long as your choice does not impact other people.
Okay.
In a negative way.
So
Yeah.
if
My understanding is that if you have received the vaccines, there's very, very little chance that an unvaccinated person is going to be able to give you the virus. So the odds are greatly in your favor. So
more question of getting the virus, and Omanon can confirm this. It's not that I am not going to get extremely sick. I still might get the virus. Actually, my brother and my sister-in-law had been vaccinated, and they had dinner with my sister-in-law's sister, who had come down with COVID soon afterwards, and they got COVID. Now, it was a very mild case, etc., but they got it, and they can spread it. What they themselves die or not is really what the vaccine is about. Is that true, Omanon?
Yes, I was going to add to that is that is true. And what is also important to recognize is that the virus, as long as it finds people who are unvaccinated, where it can multiply freely and produce new variants, that means the vaccinated people can get new variants against which the vaccine may have no power. So that's the other piece, other major danger actually right now. So you have, unless we stop it completely, we can't be safe. So more people who are unvaccinated are really allowing the virus to multiply at a fast rate and allow it to make new variants that could be deadly, because viruses multiply, viruses mutate, and we don't know which way it is going. And you already have the Delta variant, and there is one more deadly variant which has come up. I forgot the name of that. So, but it is likely that one of these mutants might just completely escape the piece that has been used for producing the vaccine, and then we are all up the creek.
Well, but then hopefully, once we understand what the new variant is, we can adjust the vaccine. We do that with the flu.
Yes, that's why people are continuously studying the variants. That's how we know that there are variants running around.
I find it interesting that the football season started about 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And many of these games, include in big colleges, they have 80,000 people plus. And looking as best you can, if you look at the crowd, very, very few people have masks on. And I was wondering if there was going to be massive outbreaks of the virus in those areas. And I haven't heard anything at all of any real big problems for the thousands and thousands of people that were there.
I don't know about the individual games. I do know that in the South and the Midwest, there are, and as far west as Idaho, there are massive outbreaks going on, and people being very, very sick. I was just reading a headline. I didn't read the whole article, but I read a headline earlier today where Idaho hospitals are at 150% capacity. Um,
I haven't seen any of those stories recently in the paper or on the news.
well, this was today. This headline was today, and I did see some stories last week where Idaho statewide said that because there was so little capacity left for the hospitals, that they needed to do triage with incoming patients and giving care to those most likely to survive, which means that somebody coming into the hospital may not get anything more than palliative care because they didn't have the capability, whether they had COVID or heart issues or name it. The capacity wasn't there.
Did you see this on a news story? Did you see this in the paper?
Yeah, in news stories, yes. And there are people that are dying in the waiting room waiting, for things that aren't COVID related. That's happening all over the country.
Whether it has anything to do with the football games that have been happening over the past few weeks, I don't know. Based on what little I hear, in a couple of weeks, we'll know more. But another consideration is that the college football games, many, if not all of the colleges, are requiring patients. So there's that much less likelihood that the virus is going to spread.
I went to Fenway Park twice during the last few weeks ago. Yeah. And they had on the news that you had to wear a face mask if you're not on the open. I saw very few people wearing face masks, period, at all, wherever they were at the park, on both games. And I saw nobody trying to enforce it.
But didn't they have a vaccine mandate for the participants, or no?
For the players?
No, for the people who were sitting on the bleachers or whatever.
No, I mean they said you're supposed to wear, if you were in a closed area underneath the stands, then you're supposed to wear a mask. But once you're in the fresh air, you didn't have to anywhere. Oh, but I saw hardly anybody, any place in the ballpark, wherever they were, wearing masks. Very, very, very few.
What about the employees at the various food stations?
I saw people. I'm sorry.
The vendors
that were working behind the counter underneath. I think many of them, maybe most of them, had face masks on, but those are the only ones, not the general public.
So the general public is not vaccinated, and the players are vaccinated, I think, right? No,
players are not required to be. There's some restrictions if you're not vaccinated. But the Red Sox, there are about 6 teams that they wanted all the teams to get up to be 85% be vaccinated. The Red Sox are one of about 6 teams that have not got there to 85% yet.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's why they're having their losing streak, because so many of the normal players are out.
Well, their players are all back now, and
I don't think there's anybody who's still on COVID watch, but I'm not sure.
Well, they were out because they got COVID.
Well, no, they
tested.
Right. They were exposed to it.
Yeah, some of them had it, and some of the other ones were exposed to it.
Yeah. Well, again, people have a right to do or not do, but they have to accept limitations or accept the consequences. I notice basketball. The rule is if you're a player and I guess a coach, although I'm not sure of that, and miss a game, you don't get paid.
Okay.
Which is obviously another way of saying do what you feel is appropriate, but here's going to be a limitation. I wonder what happens if somebody is not vaccinated and gets sick, and others either on their team or in on other teams they played against get sick. I wonder what the penalty is likely to be there. I do know, and I think it's football. Chuck, you may know this, that if a team forfeits a game because of COVID, not only do they forfeit the game, but they have to pay. They don't get their players.
None of those players in that team get paid.
And I believe they have to pay the other team.
Possibly, I don't know that part.
Yeah. So
going back on basketball again, the basketball season hasn't started yet. So even though it'll be interesting to see how, in my mind, whether they can hold that rule in place or not. Because they got some very high profile players who get a lot of money. And so some of these guys would be $20,000 to $40,000 per game they miss.
Or more. Are making 20, 25 million a year. So there's 82 games. So it could be.
They're making 20 million. That's 250,000 for missing a game. 80.
Right. Game. Well, now we get back to the question I brought up earlier. If you have freedom and two people's freedom intersect in a negative way, who gets to adjudicate, and what kind of power do you get to enforce whatever decision they make?
From my standpoint, I was thinking in this regard does that majority oppression can happen under those circumstances? So you may have people saying, well, you can't be eating beef anymore. We'll ban it from all market basket from today on because our religion or our whatever does not permit you eating beef. So market basket no longer will carry it. So that means, is that permissible, or is that legitimate, or is that also another kind of freedom which we should kind of allow people to have?
Well, I believe that our society, the American society, forbids eating horse meat or dog meat or human meat, for that matter. It already exists.
I thought people did eat horse meat in in special clubs. They had horse steaks. I heard about it a few years ago, but I don't know whether it's correct or not.
I don't know. I know they don't offer horse meat at Demoulas.
No.
So whether it's against the rules or the society objects to it, I don't know.
Actually, the U.S. Constitution, Amendment 14, which I really like, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. And that very clearly says that if you have a right and if you have a privilege, no state can take that right or privilege away.
So if I play loud,
and specifically voting.
Well, I understand
states can't make laws that inhibit people from voting. If you have a privilege that that has existed, like for instance, um, a local place where you can vote, they can't just take it away. Or, or, or if you're able to drink water in a line, they can't say you can't drink water in a line.
That's what they did actually, I thought.
Right, but it's unconstitutional.
No,
It violates the United States Constitution, Amendment 14.
They did say you can't drink water in the line. They said no individual other than a poll worker can bring you that water. You can bring it yourself. A poll worker.
But you can't make that law. No. If somebody else, if in the past other people passed water out that weren't poll workers, that's a privilege that you have that's now being taken away, and that's unconstitutional. That violates the United States Constitution.
I know that I know that the states have the right to determine their own voting rules. For example, some states make it illegal for a felon to vote, or make it illegal for a felon to vote unless they do certain things. And that has been accepted by the courts for 100 years. So it's
that's why they have so many blacks in prison. They make them felons so they can't vote.
And that was in fact part of the logic of some of the things that were done after the Civil War. But those are the rules, and the courts have said the states can, and particularly for state elections, do whatever they think appropriate. And when these laws that you're referencing get to the Supreme Court, hopefully sooner rather than later, that may be part of the decision process. Whether it's fair or not is a different story. Question is it legal?
So what we're saying is that the Supreme Court has the right to violate the United States Constitution.
The Supreme Court determines what the Constitution means. That's since Chief Justice Marshall, I think it was Marshall Mayberry versus something or another, they took the responsibility, and it has been accepted by the society, that they're the ones who interpret what these words mean.
That is Mayberry. That is Marshall, actually. That's where the discovery question was decided. Whether right. The discovery question, which is an interesting case, actually. But then again, what I was going to add to this is, before I forget, is that although you talk about abridging the rights and privileges, but that's what even Supreme Court voted to disallow blacks from voting. That was one time Supreme Court interpreted it that way.
Among other things, yes. And they interpreted that once a person had been a slave, unless they were specifically freed, they were still the property of their owner. That was Dred Scott.
Yes.
And if you read the Constitution, they probably interpreted it correctly. Whether it was fair or not, whether it was appropriate, good or not, is a different story. It's wrong. And what the Supreme Court has said is, if you pass a new law.
So this is where I kind of get confused, actually. That I find, if you really read the Constitution, that means the Supreme Court has over time changed what the original Constitution says. And it has also, that means it has kind of gone back and forth. And so what we got right now is not the same thing what the original Constitution was. That's what Scalia used to talk about. And so if we go back to that, what was the original intent and go by the letter, does that mean we will take the US society back 150 years or so? I don't know.
It would be more than 50.
I mean, 200 I'm sorry, 250 years.
And by the way, Scalia was not particularly consistent because
Yes.
he said that the Constitution allows a corporation to be considered as an individual, as a person, and therefore has all the rights and privileges, but none of the responsibilities of a person. And nowhere in the Constitution or the Federalist Papers, etc., was there any consideration of something like that. Another thing where the court goes back and forth, I believe it was in the 1880s, there was a case where the Supreme Court said segregation is okay as long as everybody's equal. And then in the 1950s, they turned it around and said separate cannot be equal by definition. And so they eliminated segregation. You can pick whatever time point that you want and whatever participants on the court you want and come up with a solution to whatever issue you want that'll go your way. The most we can do, I think, is to try to figure out what should be, and then, as the court has said, pass a law that says this is the way it should be, and then they'll enforce that law. Going back to, for a moment, the question that I had that we sort of been wandering through, but really haven't agreed to, is when two people rights and privileges and freedoms interact negatively, what function do we use to adjudicate, to figure out, who gets to do what? And I think that the courts are that function, and that's sort of what we've accepted as a society. But then the court can decide that I get to play my music at midnight, and the person who's trying to sleep can stick stuff in his ears and hopefully not be bothered. But, or vice versa, I can't play my music at midnight. Who enforces that? Aren't we making a case for government that the function is not just to protect us from outside invaders, etc., but from each other, to kind of enforce some form of order so that people understand what they can and cannot do, and avoid when somebody gets in their way for whatever reason, whether legitimately or not, pulling out a gun and shooting him. And then, of course, having their family go and shoot the first guy and his family, and the Hatfields and the McCoys. Does that make sense? Is there a legitimate function of government that does these things?
Right. I mean, you have to, if I might interject there, that you have to then, number one, have formulated a rule or a convention as a majority opinion, and then hand it over to the police to really enforce it. So whatever that majority has decided, that will be enforced by the police. Let the police do the job, and that job may be not fair, but that's what they will do. I mean, I lived in a place in Somerville where we had 3 apartments. The topmost apartment, one of the guys came in there and he actually exactly did what you were describing. He would play his guitar and his big speakers at beginning at 9 p.m. until midnight. So both of us, the 2 different floors, we complained. And we complained, and finally they asked him to leave. And he sued. And he said, you know, this is discrimination. And I don't know whatever happened to the case because I also left later. So it does happen. But we didn't call the police actually. But that was supposed to be the landlord's job.
So Chuck,
Going into a little bit different area on this here, as far as with Facebook and some of these social platforms, as far as them deciding who can stay on Facebook or Twitter, and then making the decision in their judgment that what somebody is saying is disinformation or whatever, and making that an issue. So there's a big problem with that also.
and I agree, but what is the alternative to that? Can I sue the person who said on Facebook that that if you take the vaccine, you're being they're putting bots into your body that will cause someone to know exactly where you are, or that you're going to die, or you're going to get the palsy, or you're going to get become impotent. What's the alternative? If
Well, I'm not saying there's an alternative. I'm saying that somebody can, you know, is going to be, someone's going to possibly sue them saying you're defaming what my information is. So that's the same thing, whether or not somebody's playing music too loud. The other person has a right to bring them to court. You can bring somebody to court because, but this whole thing with these platforms, they're saying their algorithms tell them that you're out of bounds, and so it's a lot of litigation that's going on in that areas.
and I agree. I think the worst thing that can happen to our society is that every word that someone speaks, every word can be litigated, and we see just from hell. Look at the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Things can take years to go through, and meanwhile, the damage is done. So, in the same way, think of Facebook for the moment as the same thing as the landlord in Omanon's case. Facebook has made the decision that rather than be constantly going to court and fighting, etc., they will in fact take the responsibility to ensure, hopefully, and I do mean hopefully because there's no guarantee, that the only information that's being spread is at least correct, as correct as is known and understood at the present time. And the moment you open Facebook up to take that responsibility, you now have lost the freedom of speech, and the next president of Facebook might be a QAnon person, at which point suddenly all the things that are legal today are verboten tomorrow. I don't like that idea. I don't know what to do about it, because one of the problems with democracy and freedom is, as long as everybody sort of accepts certain norms, then the system works. But when someone says, no, I won't accept that, then the system goes haywire, and suddenly we don't have the freedom that we're trying to protect. So I don't have a good answer for what's going on, Maybe you guys have a thought.
But that's what Chuck actually pointed out in the beginning, that the whole privilege we have in this country of freedom of speech, that is supposed, that should be protected. We may not like what is being said, but that freedom has to be protected. But at the same time, I think it boils down to individuals and the society to provide some constraints. Although I might want to say a whole bunch of things, but given the limitations, I may not say it. But the government should not be the one who tells me you cannot turn right or turn left. So that's what the privilege we have here in this country, of freedom of to act, think, and speak.
But that goes along with what Paul said earlier, as far as that it's not going to endanger somebody in some way or other.
Right, and that's what is endangerment. Not being able to sleep at night, and so therefore not being able to do your job in the morning, and therefore losing your job. That's endangerment. Not only endangerment. Family. I think the key, which is what I was trying to get at before, was we have to accept certain norms and work within those norms. There's going to be a whole bunch of conflict, even given the norms. But we have to, at minimum, accept certain norms, or we can't coexist. We can only exist with the people who, for whatever reason, are willing to accept our norms or enforce their norms, and we don't have any choice.
Well, part of the reason we have so much, that's why part of the reason is that's why we have so many lawyers. There's so many ways that you can interpret things, that there's a big field for lawyers to get involved.
Right. They perform a necessary function, sometimes too well, but they perform a necessary function.
Well, I've always thought that if you go to sue somebody and you lose your case, then you probably should have to pay expenses of having sued that person. And so that there'll be some way of discouraging people just to be sued happy.
What do you do if I'm a poor person and I sue a rich person, and the rich person wins, and now I have to pay an exorbitant sum because the rich person hired very expensive lawyers?
Well, I think just quickly, I would just say that I think the court would have to take in relationship that person's poor and can only afford a certain minimum amount. But I just think should be some type of penalty against the person who brought charges about something.
Well, actually, there are.
Even if the charges were correct?
If the charges were not correct.
Well, I mean, the charges can be correct or not correct, but the outcome may be different. Meaning, the charges can be correct, but the person gets exonerated by a jury or something, or or vice versa. And
sorry.
So it's I don't know.
There already is something called a frivolous, where if the judge decides that the suit being brought is frivolous, has no merit whatsoever, they can make the person who brought the suit pay the court costs. That's happening to Rudy Giuliani as we speak. So there is some possibility of trying to reduce these suits on everything that you can name. But I think if you take it too much further, you're actually eliminating the possibility of someone who's not rich from getting any protection from the courts. in something other than a criminal case. Even in a criminal case, we know that if you can't afford a lawyer, they will assign somebody to you, but that person is unlikely to be very experienced and may not be capable of providing a good defense. It's better than nothing, but it's certainly not fair.
Yeah, in theory, it's supposed to be fair.
Understood.
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, I was going to repeat that in practice, life is not fair. And that's why Bob pointed out, if you have a rich person hiring exceptional lawyers, and they are going to find a way to make the case go away. And a poor person will suffer.
My kids used to get upset with me when I used to say to them when they were younger, they complain about something, and I'd often say to them, well, life isn't always fair. And they'd often say back to me, well, I knew you were going to say that.
I mean, that's so correct, actually. I mean, no matter what we say, that's how the world is. We might complain, but
make things
what use?
Well, because complaining sometimes has the effect of making people say, yeah, that's right. What can we do about that?
I mean, that's what actually there was a long time ago, they used to say that's how the bills are made for Congress. That was a children's show, how a bill is made. I forgot it was a show on TV.
I think it was from Sesame Street, but I'm not sure.
I don't remember, but that was a nice way to show when you complain, how you can actually create an opinion that can be then made into a bill to redress your grievance eventually. But that's going to take a long time. So there you go.
Yeah, and it probably should, because nothing is really simple. And other people who believe something different than you believe have some legitimate reasons why they believe that. It may be something that you don't accept as being legitimate, but their self-interest may be that it should be this way because this is what's best for me.
And that's why we have democracy.
Yeah. But again, democracy depends on everybody sort of agreeing. When Trump decided that he didn't have to honor any requests from the legislature, from Congress, that had never really been done before. But he said, sue me. And the reality was, I sued him, he could delay it for so long that it no longer mattered. The old saw, justice delayed is justice denied.
Mm-hmm.
That's how he's operated most of his life. I sorry, I didn't mean to be bring Trump into this, but
bring Trump in. I can bring that makes me allowed to maybe bring Biden into the case too. So I think it's a number of things I can say in reference to Biden, especially at this time. One miscellaneous thing I found a little just as a miscellaneous item is that obviously most people have seen about the hearings on Afghanistan going on, and General Milley. I don't know if anybody knows that he's from Winchester, Massachusetts.
Wow, I didn't know that.
He went to Belmont Hill for his high school education.
Wow.
I thought that was just kind of interesting.
My daughter's friends from high school went to Belmont Hill.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good school from what I understand.
Yeah, that's what I understand it is too. And anyways.
So is that
Wow.
what you have against Biden? You went to Belmont Hill? Or no?
What's that?
Is that what you have against Biden?
No, no,
That
it
he
has
went to
nothing,
Belmont
has
Hill?
nothing to do with that. I just thought it was
Oh, okay.
interesting that he went to Belmont Hill and
So,
it's Winchester.
so he's from Winchester?
There's many things I have against Biden, so we don't have time to get started on that.
Okay.
We can talk about that at a later date.
And another time. Yep.
And I'm sure we will. Getting back to the freedom thing, what can we do to equalize freedom? As Zomanon was pointing out, life isn't fair. As you were pointing out, life isn't fair. And part of what's makes, you know, the old thing from Animal Farm, all pigs are equal, but some pigs are more equal than others. There's also all people are equal, but some people are more equal than others, and money has a great deal to do with it. Money and who your parents were. What can we do to provide more freedom to those who have less? Or maybe let's look at it from another point of view. If you have nothing to lose, you have more freedom than if you have more to lose.
I think this is a huge question you are actually bringing up towards the end, and I only was going to say I'm going to say only one thing, that no matter what we think, it is only in the United States we have all these freedoms available. So I think it becomes imperative that you got to, number one, as you recognize that if you have more money, you are more free, you have more opportunities to be free. And if you are born rich, of course, you have a better availability, you have more people listen to you because you are at a certain state, certain place in society because of that. I don't think any legislation is going to change that. Only thing you got to do, only thing we hope is that individuals themselves will recognize the power they have because of where they are, and accordingly exercise that to propagate freedoms rather than restrictions.
Okay.
I go back and on what you said, Bob, you said something about life not being fair. I would just add in that life is not always fair, because in many ways you get what you deserve in many cases. And so in those cases, life was fair to that person, but there are many situations where other things happen.
I'd like to think that you're right. I don't necessarily believe it, but I'd like to think that you're right. I know too many people who started at a certain place in our society, and for all intents and purposes, were never in a position to do anything else other than remain there. And maybe it's the old Horatio Alger that everybody can go beyond, but you need either extraordinary talent, extraordinary luck, or someone to give you that extra push in a direction that you may not be aware of or may not have otherwise have access to. And I think in large measure, society would benefit more from making things more equal. But you have to look at each individual case. There isn't any start point, because as a parent, I want my kid to have every opportunity I can give them. And if that means that somebody